But anyway, tonight's going to be a little different. We're going to do a little didactic kind of teaching here, but then we're going to make it more interactive, okay? And with this, we're going to try and pull things together. But I do want to recap some things. And so let's recap some things. As I mentioned in the very first class, humanism is really a blend of both the Enlightenment and the Romantic movement. The Enlightenment movement had three basic features of reason, tolerance, and reason, tolerance, and freedom as the hallmarks for that. Romantic movement was a counter movement trying to say the emotional, the evocative, etc. needs to take place. Anyway, what eventually developed was humanism, mainly in the beginning of the 20th century. But it was linked with modernism. Modernism was that idea that there was to replace religion, there was a rational way to do things, a rational way to build society, and we could know things with reason and science and build a more perfect person and society. The Humanist Manifesto came out in 1933, which basically was a new way of putting all the pieces together, a whole Weltanschauung, as they say. It's a whole life stance, a philosophy of life, putting all the pieces together. And but during that whole thing, there was a lot of people kind of putting the pieces together, but it finally got together in 1933. The American Humanist Association came together in 1949 by the same people, Ed Wilson especially, who wrote much of the Humanist Manifesto 1. There's been 3 manifestos, and we're going to talk today about Manifesto 3, the latest. Humanism, as I mentioned, is an evolving tradition. I underline tradition. It's not just one philosophy. There's strings and threads of thought going through it, but it's evolving, and hopefully will keep evolving and not get stagnant. What really has happened, though, as I mentioned, is that many humanists, rationalists, atheists, whatever you want to call ourselves, but have gotten bogged down in 20th century or, frankly, 19th century ideas that have long since been found to be untrue. And so we talked about a bit about that, but it was basically, through the 20th century, a long, slow revolution, discrediting, number one, rationalism. I was having a talk with a philosopher here tonight about logical positivism and analytical philosophy, largely discrediting that. And basically, cut to the chase. In the end, pragmatism won. And pragmatism was what the early founders of humanism originally were built around, especially with John Dewey. But kind of went out of favor with all these other schools of thought, but now is back in favor. What happened, postmodernism came into being, discrediting a lot of the things, but also, like every good idea, it takes a good idea too far, and basically said that that what we know is all, underlying all, social contrivance. That everything we know is just human construction, and basically not even much a human as much as a social construction. We found out that during this, epistemologically, during the class on epistemology, that science is the best, but not only way to understand, explain, predict, and control the world. But there's also, sadly for us, in a way, there is no absolute grounding for anything we believe. And I gave the example of Otto Neurath, and saying that he gave the metaphor, the boat metaphor, that science is like a boat out at sea. And it never gets to shore, the safe shores of a safe foundation, being, let's say, a dry dock. So it's out at sea, and it leaks. You find things wrong with your beliefs, and it has to fix them. And it does it without foundations, or, as they call it, skyhooks, be it God, or, let's say, rational tools. the cranes that we have on the ship have to fix itself. And that's why science works, is because it is the only self-correcting method of knowledge. It bootstraps itself. It grounds itself because it works. And I always use the example of postmodernists say, oh, you can't believe anything, and it's all relative and everything else. And I say, well, then at 40,000 feet, there are no postmodernists. Because if you're going to have a faith in your life, and you put it up in the air, you're putting your faith in technology and science to support it. All knowledge, as we know, is three things. It's tentative. It's the best we know right now. It's fallible. We could be wrong. And it's also probabilistic. We know something's better than others. One time, Bertrand Russell was asked by a newspaper reporter, what would you do if you died and you went to heaven and stood before Jesus Christ? What would you say to him? He said, well, I'd just say you didn't give me enough evidence. In other words, his point is, he's not agnostic. He's, saying I don't believe in God, but, he's leaving the door open for all truth and, give me the proof. Give me the evidence. In the end, out of all epistemological methods, pragmatism wins. Science grounds itself because it works. And we found that what we've seen in the 20th century, that rationalism of all sorts, be it communism or objectivism, libertarianism, all of these isms, ideology leads to, frankly, ideology kills. It leads to rational methods that are ungrounded ultimately, but basically only confirm our own prejudices. We talked about in the third class that all ethical theories based on rationalism have been to be ungrounded, and consequentialism in the end wins. But that doesn't mean, when we're looking at the consequences, that the act isn't important. We talked about rules of behavior are good, but the problem is they're good rules of thumb, and every one of them has problems. And Charlie brought up the example of the golden rule, which many people, humanists, like to tout. But in the end, even the golden rule, if you're an Islamic terrorist in Iran and you believe that if you or your family member or anybody becomes an apostate, doesn't believe in Allah, they should be killed, well, then that's the right ethical thing to do. So it's quite situational. So there's other ethical rules that we need to use, like the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Every single rule we have has problems. But yet, every single rule we got, the old aphorisms and rules, have some element of truth. So I pointed out that morality is more like painting a painting, putting all the pieces together. And the most dangerous thing we can do, ideologically, is think that there's some kind of like mathematical formula, like absolute utilitarianism or any of these other isms, to give us the right answer, like a mathematical formula. It's not easy, folks. Life's messy. Our focus should be on the consequences, but the rules, the guidelines are important to realize. They should be viewed as situationally and holistically viewed together, but not as isolated, definitive rules. I also talked about my favorite philosopher in the world, in the 20th century for sure, Isaiah Berlin. He popularized that notion of pluralism. He sees a value pluralism, not because we're just trying to be pluralistic, but that all of our ultimate high values are objective, but they're irreducibly diverse. They are conflicting with each other, and they're uncombinable. And when they do come in conflict with each other or one another, they're incommensurable. That means you can't compare them by any rational measure. Further, the idea of the perfect society in which all genuine ideals and goods are achieved, it's not only utopian, it's incoherent. Political life, like moral life, abounds in radical choice between rival goods and evils, where reason just leaves us in the lurch. And whatever is done involves necessary loss and sometimes tragedy. And that's why Berlin calls it a tragic liberalism, because there's unavoidable conflict and irreparable loss between inherently rivalrous values. Those great values like justice, truth, freedom, economic justice, compassion. Every one of those can come in conflict with others, and there's no rational way to choose. Again, life's messy, but that's the way it really is. And for rationalists, sometimes that's hard to come to grips with. Of course, people want simple rules like the Ten Commandments or simple ideologies to tell them the right answer, politically or ethically or whatever. And it just isn't that way. We have to think more in holistic ways. The postmodernist critiques told us that much of what passes for reason is really, and here we're the people that hold up the torch of the Enlightenment. And what happened with the postmodern critiques, and believe me, I'm no big friend of postmodernism because of the radicalism, but they're right about one thing, that much of what passes for reason is merely readjusting our own prejudices. Reason evolved more for winning arguments than for finding truth. As I like to put it, we're more rationalistic animals than rational animals. We love to rationalize. So at the end, we come down, we should be humbler today. We should see that there is no formula, meta-narrative for how to live or give us the good life. Life's messy. Now, tonight, I want to give you a broad overview of the various styles of humanism. And what I mean by styles, these aren't ideologies. Sometimes people think, oh, that's the right way to do humanism or atheism. And by the way, we have all these titles: atheism, agnostic, humanism, rationalist, freethinker, secularist. I don't know, I probably missed 5 or 6 of them. In the end, we're talking about people who believe that this world is all there is, and it's enough. And that's naturalistic philosophy, meaning this world is all there is and it's enough. If you believe that, though, then it means that there's different ways you can live your life. It doesn't say how to live your life, or what your focus is. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is your style, and I underline your style of humanism, but also see that there's various styles out there. One of the things that people are surprised when they come into our group is they think everybody's going to think like they do, or do like they do, or be like they do, and that's not true. What you find is there's a huge pluralism. And I'm kind of a middle ground kind of guy, but also I've come to realize that we need the extreme ends to kind of keep everybody honest too. The middle can become the mediocre middle, if you will. But it is important. We're going to be doing self-reflection tonight and trying to find out what our own style of humanism is. But I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about religion. And I want to talk about the philosophy of religion. Many people think, well, religion, in our groups, think, well, humanism, religion, it's just belief in God. Well, not really. Most of these sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, philosophers have pointed out in practice that religion has more functional aspects than ideological ones, actually. And in many cases, it completely dominates. And if we're going to be true to who we are, we have to understand what those factors are to understand ourselves, because not believing in God doesn't take away some of those other factors. So I'm going to talk on one pole right now about people that still are trying to hold on to the liberal religious aspects, functional aspects of community, ethics, things like that. And then I'm going to go all the way to the hardcore atheistic side. We're going to see all different poles and everything else. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the major philosophers and religious thinkers in this area. Paul Tillich was one of the major figures. He was a philosopher of religion who was totally naturalist. He was a total atheist. But he talked about God when you really look down at it, it ends up being what is our ultimate concern. So what many people talk about being the religious redefinition game, which can be kind of sordid actually sometimes, but got away from the naturalism, and Paul Tillich called it that which is our ultimate concern. Now think about it. That really is important. For each one of us, whether you're a believer or non-believer, what is our ultimate concern and why? He's just saying that is a critical factor. Wilfred Cantwell Smith is, by the way, people collect stamps and coins and all kinds of stuff. I collect definitions. I've got a definition of the book, that thing, on God, one on religion, that thing. And Wilfred Cantwell Smith is a Canadian Islamic theorist. I love his definition, I think the best. And it's that which we ultimately rely on. He calls it faith, because you remember faith can mean both that which we believe in the supernatural, also could be a synonym for definition for what we rely on. But he's saying, when we really are down, when the chips are down, what do we ultimately rely on? Did any of you see The Road or read the book The Road? And it was a question where the question there was a Holocaust was happening. You don't know what it is. And a boy and a father are walking through a devastated landscape. It's like 12 years after this Holocaust, undefined Holocaust. And people are into cannibalism and they're starving and everything. And there's no way out. He's unremitting in not letting you out. And he asked that question. The whole question of the book is, when everything else is taken away from you, when you're shorn of everything, what do you have? What do you rely on? In his case, it was love. Love of his son, no matter what. It's a scary book, but it's also a tender book. It's a love story, actually. That was his answer. So, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, again, maybe it comes from a different perspective than we know, but I think he's onto something. He's asking an important question. What is it that we ultimately rely on? I have been in some very bad things in my life, and I know there are certain things that I have, when everything else is going, what did I rely on? And I'm sure every person here has a story in that sense too. What did you really pull up? There's another theory of religion, I'll point out. When you teach classes on philosophy of religion, there's a guy down in Vanderbilt. God, he slips my mind right now, but he uses Ludwig Wittgenstein's definitional aspects. Ludwig Wittgenstein, if you remember, he was the guy that challenged his mentor, Bertrand Russell, to give up 18 years of work on trying to prove mathematics was logical. Well, he also, he later on developed a theory about language, that there are some words that have no exact definition, like beauty. Trying to find beauty. But he says what we can do, we can give what they call family traits. There are words that you give family traits to. What does that mean? That means that if you look at a family, there's no one trait that you could really say, like maybe some of them have a big nose, or one of them, a lot of them are tall or something, but there's certain things. But there is a group, a cluster of traits that seem good. Now, if you all have the sheet that has the spreadsheet sort of thing, yes, the spreadsheet. Can I borrow yours for a second? But this spreadsheet, this is done in a book, Reason and Religion. And what he does is he's pointing out the various family traits that may or may not be. Belief in a supernatural being, of course, is preeminent, then works his way down, prayer, rituals, sacred objects, place deep and intense concern, religious experiences. And you can see, if we put all of these things on the top across there, including communism, moral, naturalistic humanism, spiritualistic pantheism, and even golf, you can see where you can put present or absent. And so there's traits. And you can see where maybe even golf, I'm sure some of you know people were absolutely fanatics about golf, and that was their, in a sense, their religion. The point I'm trying to make here, and the author's trying to make, there is no exact cutoff. When the Buddhists are, early Hinayana, actually we shouldn't call that Hinayana, because it's a derogative term, but Theravada is a better term for that type of Hinduism. But it's clearly non-theistic. So is that a religion or not? And when we go through those present absences, there's no exact cutoff. My point is that there's all of these aspects that may or may not be asked in ourselves, might be present in ourselves, or other religions or ways to do things. Generally, I think most of us would say that a belief in the supernatural is what defines religion. And this is but I'm going to just point out there's no exact definition. And I think that if nothing else, this points out that there's a range of possibilities that we need to look at, if not from a clear definition, but from a functional aspect. A good example of that, by the way, if you remember we talked about the Ethical Culture Society, and there's one up in Raleigh, and we have the leader of that group speak to us. They're clearly humanist, non-theistic, but, it was based on the premise that religion boils down to two things, ethics and community. And all that God stuff, that's irrelevant. And so they practice community, ethical teaching of children, and, doing good works, but clearly humanists, non-theistic. The Unitarian Church, this is where humanism, organized humanism originally started. At one point in the 50s, it was 89% of Unitarian Universalists called themselves humanists. It's about 49% now. But it was clearly, I was the president of the church in Charlotte, and Suzanne and I went there, and it was clearly humanistic. You just didn't say the word God in there. But it had all the functional aspects that you would expect. John Dewey, let's talk about John Dewey. We've talked about him being one of the fathers of pragmatism for us, or certainly what's called instrumentalism. But John Dewey made a distinction, and he made a distinction between religion, or religions, and religious. And the adjective meaning, what are those things that we do that might be considered religious, like awe and wonder, being inspired by awe and wonder. Those religious aspects, maybe in his way of thinking, whether you're a humanist or not. So there's one pole there where we talk about the varieties of religious naturalism. But that means people that are naturalistic, but don't believe in God, but are trying to capture some of those religious aspects. Spinoza was one of the first. It's hard to tell whether he was a deist or a pantheist. Most people say he was a pantheist. But that's, a God that's in everything. God is the whole universe. Deists believe God started up the universe, and then let it run. It's our job to figure out how to do it. Almost all the founding fathers of this country were deists. They didn't believe in a God that had active ability in our world at this time. Another aspect of religious naturalism I'll talk about is what's called process theology. Now, this is dominant right now in the Unitarian Universalists, and actually many of the Reformed Jewish congregations and the UCC and things like that. And what that is, process theology stems out of Alfred North Whitehead. Remember, he was the person working with Bertrand Russell for 18 years. But primarily Charles Hartshorne and another fellow named Wendell Berlow. And this is an aspect of looking that God, it's naturalistic, supposedly, but the language gets all muddled, so you don't quite know. But God is immanent rather than eminent. In other words, it's not a God that looks over all. It's immanent in the world. And God is a verb, not a noun. In other words, it's a process. What we're in is a process of godliness. It's called also by the term panentheism, not pantheism, but panentheism. It's very, very dominant within UU circles today. And remember when we had Bob Tapp speak here? Bob Tapp taught at University of Chicago Theological School at Beetle Lombard and with Wendell Berho, and got fired because he was opposed to process theology. It's a long, dirty story. But humanists have had to take their licks and wounds to these things. Another way that's very common in the world today, in liberal religion, is where God is seen as that which is unexplained. We have all these things we don't quite understand why things occur. Maybe it's commonly referred to as the God of the gaps. The minister here, nice lady, and she definitely is in that God of the gaps area. God is that which we don't quite understand or know. So, we can keep it. It's not naturalistic for sure then, but it certainly is not the normal way of looking at it. The reason I'm trying to give this to you is when we talk about, humanists talk about God, we like, oh, there's God or no God. No, there's a whole gradation of possibilities. So I'm trying to give you some of the ones that are, shall we say, more close to us. Of course, we've seen in the last 25 years the New Age, where everything is interconnected by this inexplicable force. And we talk about spirituality. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean just an emotional bending, but it can also mean where you actually have a oneness with this energy, etc. But what's good is it largely has secular ethics in large part. It's mostly secular ethics. There's another way some people talk about it, maybe not so much New Age, but it's called fuzzy theism. It's where there's a God, but it's quite indescribable. It really goes all the way back to Ralph Waldo Emerson. Remember I talked about his oversoul. His oversoul was totally naturalistic. He never explained what that was. It was always fuzzy. There was, in that New Age group, of course, you got Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Oprah Winfrey, very close to us in terms of how we think in terms of ethics and things like that, but certainly not epistemologically or metaphysically about how the world works. There's also been religious naturalists like Santayana, Ursula Goodenough, Henry Nelson Wyman, Chet Reno, the Bishop John Henry Spaulding, Gordon Kaufman, and Jerome Stone today. These are people, if you read their writings, they're beautiful writings. I urge you, to read them because if you get by some of the God talk, there's some really, really beautiful, beautiful things there. Now let's talk about the other extreme. Let's flip it over. Let's talk about the hardcore atheists. Sometimes we refer to people when they first come out and get out of religion. Many times people are burned out by it when they realize they've been taken from it, shall we say. We call those the come-outers. And generally people are angry and got to get over that anger. Most of the time people get over it, sometimes they don't. Paul Kurtz has called the lure of religion as the transcendental temptation. Meaning, we got something in us that just always tempts us to go, and it's in our genes or whatever, but also socially, that makes us want to believe that there's something like the energy, like the New Agers. There's an energy, inexplicable energy that I can connect with everybody else. Or there's a transcendental temptation that let's say freedom is the ultimate value, or this whole rationalistic scheme that you get into as well. But we're always doing that. And the bottom line is there is nothing sacred. There's nothing sacred. And once we start to think something is sacred, then we get in trouble. Now, I'll say this. There's many within the humanist movement that say, the problem with that. You notice I'm trying to get flip sides on all of this. The flip side on that is We have to have some overriding, maybe not sacred, but values are persistent things that enhance our lives. Again, what Paul Tillich calls the ultimate concerns. Maybe we don't need to make it the ultimate, godlike, but we need to have those values that really move us forward, give us hope when we're down, and move us towards inspiration in the bad times, but also inspires the good works and deeds. Many believe that, in the end, religion is dangerous and it's a pious fraud. And we get self-congratulatory self-righteousness. I went to my class reunion, or not, my college buddies reunion, 45 years ago I hadn't seen it. And one woman at the end, who was a little drunk, I got kind of blindsided. I didn't realize. She started asking about smart recovery, and then she started dealing with her new age baloney about the energy fields and everything else. And, but when she started talking, as soon as she started talking about that, she goes, there's an energy between us. I believe there's this energy between us that makes us connected. And I go, oh, God. Everybody, by the way, and I'm sure you've seen this, everybody's got to try and convert me. I am so tired of it. I am so tired. But anyway, the point is, she was a nice lady, I know that. But, the voice, what is it? It's the piousness. This emotional connection that I've got this wonderful view and everything else. And finally I said, well, why did you tell me all this? She said it twice. She says, because I want you to believe what I believe. I mean, literally, she said, I want you. And I go, well, why? She said, because you'll be happier. I go, I'm happy! So this is kind of on the other end, the pious fraud aspect. And the question is religion innocuous? Because most liberal religionists, it's innocuous and they do good deeds. It's all this other thing. Many people talk about also that in the end, it's a reversion to the mean. If the mean is fundamentalism, frankly, that liberal religion always kind of ends up going that way in some aspect where people end up going into that. So I just point that out, but I also, again, the flip side is we can fall into that trap as well. I know a lot of humanists, atheists, and free thinkers who are so damn pious, they got that one truth. I know there's no God. Okay, fine, I'm with you there. But that means that everything's settled, and they don't need to know anything else, and real self-righteous about it. And I was talking to Han earlier about it, that, that's all well and good, but you say that their foundation of the Bible is allowable. This whole course has been built around what are our foundations? To me, I don't have a lot of respect for people who aren't asking their own questions. If they're a humanist, about what are your foundations for belief? How do you live your life? All of these other issues. So we can fall into that trap too. We can also find simple answers. The communists found simple answers, and 30 million people died because of it. But we still are plagued with the old age-old questions that religion always has been asking. Where do we find? These are very human elements. Forget about the ideological. I'm talking about existential elements in our lives. Where do we find awe and wonder and inspiration? And not fall into that transcendental temptation. Where do we find comfort in the hard times? Where do we find meaning and purpose in what we view a largely meaningless universe? What I'd like to offer here, before we move on, is that all of these things are emergent properties, like ethics was. We talked about that. Yes, it's all relative in the big scheme of things in the universe. But our lives are relative, but they're not arbitrary. Our transcendental needs arise out of very certain existence in nature. We are social animals. We have to live with each other. We have to find an ethical way to live with each other. We are emotional animals. We do have these needs for awe and wonder. But, you know, we have to find these emergent properties. How do we find these and yet keep our religious and intellectual integrity and not fall into these traps? That's the question that we have to ask. Now, and individually, there is no, by the way, I hope you don't get this wrong, there is no right answer for that. There are some answers, maybe, generalized answers, but there's some answers for you. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because we're going to talk about your style of humanism. And what we're going to do, I've got various polarities for humanism. I set up. Now, every time you set up a polarity, it necessarily excludes, there might be 3 or 4 directions, you know. But I'm sorry, I think in linear terms, so I'm setting the rules here. And so there's a self-test you've got. You should have, does everybody have that self-test? Got right. You know, it's the, this one thing, where do I have? My style of humanism. Anybody not have it? Okay. What we're going to do, I'm going to go through it because some of the things on here are not immediately intuitively obvious. So we're going to walk through these. And what I'd like you to do, this is grading yourself for, frankly, self-reflection, for critical self-reflection to see how you are. There's no right answer or wrong answer here. It just is. And then after we get done, we're going to post these up on the back and then take your answers and put an X on there, and we're going to see where the group is. Okay? But be honest as you can with yourself. The rational and emotional one, remember we talked about humanism being a product of both the Enlightenment and the Romantic movements. Well, that's sort of what that is. So put an X along there where you think you might be from 1 to 10. Empirical, intuitional. Empirical means you look at the data. Intuitional, you go with the gut. You know, what's your gut feeling on things? Does everybody have a pen? No. Okay.
Came to class on it.
Anybody else? Okay. Precise language and metaphor. Remember we talked about some people, you know, are very Platonic. There is a right word for everything. And other people like to think more in metaphors, stories. Are you a loner or are you social? Do you think more in terms of you want certainty for some answers, or do you generate more towards the ambiguity? Are you more attracted to mystery or reality? You're really not concerned about, you know, the mystery in life. You just give me the facts, man. Are you more compassionate? Or at least your orientation is, or are you more in the selfish rate? Do you like to think in terms of orderedness or randomness? It might be exhibited, for example, how you keep your house. You know, do you line up everything in orders and things, or do you think in order terms or need to think? Or are you, you know, kind of more random? Do you like to think of things clearly, or do you tend to be more confused? Remember that term, awe and wonder. Are you attracted more to awe and wonder, or are you more in reality-based? Do you think more in holistic terms? Isaiah Berlin talked about the hedgehog and the fox. Do you think of big ideas, overarching ideas, or do you tend to look at the details mostly? Are you introverted or extroverted? Do you like, again, the big picture or the small details? Are you attracted to the arts or science? Are you outer directed, meaning are you directed more to what's going on in the world, politics, other people, family, etc.? Or are you more inner directed, the navel watching kind of thing? Are you tolerant or intolerant? Do you have an angry humanism? Boy, you're pissed off at religion, you just want to get those sacraments. Or are you kind of like, I don't really care, I'm just living a positive life? Do you need grounding, or do you don't require grounding? Do you like or attracted to certainty, or are you more attracted towards an agnostic position in life? Do you think of yourselves as being an active humanist or a passive humanist? Humanism. In other words, you want to get active, or do you just, it's just the way I am? This is somewhat important. Do you like to think, we're very good, by the way, most of us, in critical thinking and critical aspects, but also there's another aspect of supportive thinking. I was joking earlier, Suzanne and I tend to be too critical at times, and she's supportive, where I would be more critical, like with the kids or something like that. Do you think of more the heart or the mind? Are you open-minded or closed-minded? Once you figure it all out, you got your answer, that's it. Do you think of stories or formulas? Do you think of the world, how you live in terms of stories, or more in terms of little compartmentalized mathematical formulas or rules? There's rules like 10 Commandments are rules. You're looking for humanist rules, how to live your life. Now this is important. This gets into ministers. This is my own dichotomy. What became very popular, well, let me go back. What was really popular among humanist ministers like in UUA and ethical culture was the heroic view of who we are. Yes, we got problems, we're going to fight through it and everything else. It's that heroic nature. We're going to, we can get through it. And then feminists, etc., came in and said, in actuality, we're all wounded creatures. And this is the extreme version. And Rebecca Parker, I've got that article on her feminist critique of humanism. That's where she was the main person on the wounded. They call it wounded healers. In other words, the minister's job is just to be a wounded healer. Everybody's wounded in some way, you're supposed to heal them. Or do you see yourself as heroic? Did you fight through the problems? You question that. Are you happy or depressed? Are you anti-religion or just friendly to religion? Maybe somewhere between, you don't give a damn. Do you harbor old religious wounds or no religious wounds? Are you activist or apathetic? Are you a searcher? Are you still in that mode where you're really searching for your beliefs and systems? Are you pretty sunk? Are you serious or are you humorous? Do you like ritual? Remember, that's one of the aspects about religion. We had one of these Monday night meetings or something. We were talking about ritual for humanists, weddings and funerals and that. And one of the people just was appalled that we were going to be doing humanist ceremonies because it was too much like religion and everything else. Because, there should, he was definitely on the anti-ritual. And other people like to have a lot of ritual. Maybe you're in the middle, I don't know. Are you critical or are you supportive? I think of it this way. We have critical intelligence and we have supportive intelligence. Some people just know better how to support other people better. Some people are good at critical thinking. Do you tend more towards judgmental aspects of life? How do you live your life? Or do you tend more towards mercy? Are you pretty much a person of habit? You get in your groove and that's it? Or, as the Buddhists call it, mindfulness. Do you really think about what's going on around you? What are you doing? All right, now, take a look down there at your list on my style of humanism. Take a look. Hopefully you'll see some things. I don't know. Right off the bat, I'd like you to just put down, if you learned anything from that, how do you want to evolve? Is there anything you would like to change about yourself? Put that down. This is not for me. This is only for you. And then take it home and look at it some other time. I just encourage you to look at that and see, this is your style. It's not right or wrong. This is your style. Maybe you like certain aspects of it. Maybe you don't. But this is again, self-reflection. Now, we're going to take a break here in a minute. But what I'd like to do is, I've got these sheets, I've got these on here, and I'm going to take these up here, and during the break, if you can put an X along here, and we'll just see how the group sees themselves and what, maybe we'll have total unanimity, maybe we'll see more diversity. I don't know, I really don't know what to expect. This is the first time I've done this, so let's take a look at ourselves and see what we are. I'll put these up and take a break, and in 10 minutes get back together after you hopefully put these up, your X's. And make your X's small, or not small, well, maybe like that picture.
Yeah.
Charlie, we're gonna kind of crowd around up here if I can.
No, actually, you better. I might put mine up.
Let's see if we can learn something.
Yeah, okay.
That's all those.
Okay.
The rational, emotional, that's pretty spread out. It's a lot more, of course, towards the rational. Empirical, intuitional, again, kind of spread out. This is interesting. Precise language and metaphor. Fairly clustered to the middle. Loner, social. Most people think they're pretty balanced in that area.
Yeah.
Certainty and ambiguity. It's really interesting. I was just saying, there was a study done recently where they looked at various factors of what defines a conservative versus a liberal. You know what the number one factor was? The ability to deal with ambiguity defined a liberal. Conservatives just can't deal with ambiguity. And of course, what do we talk about on ethics? On ethics, you know, sometimes there's no answer, but we got to choose. You know, and we don't have exactly the right tool to use. You know, we got all these rules, but they're in conflict with each other. But liberals seem to be able to handle that better than others. Mystery reality. Now, this is a surprise to me. I thought there would be more up here, but it's virtually all up towards reality. Compassionate, selfish. I'm glad. I'm going to take a donation for myself later on. So, by the way, I retired last week. Thank you. I feel so good about it. I can't tell you how good I feel about it. Ordered and random. Isn't that interesting? A random. It's fairly random, isn't it? But look at, there's some people who are obviously obsessive compulsives. You know, getting it all ordered up. Clear versus confused. Again, you know, people like to be confused. Clear, but it's okay. Awe and wonder. I'm surprised. That is a pretty even distribution.
A bit more on the awe.
Yeah, more towards awe and wonder, I guess. There's 4 in there, that's true. But there's 3 here.
Yeah.
And then a cluster in the middle, so it's pretty balanced. Holistic versus reductionist. Wow. There's some people who really like to think holistically, and there's a couple very much in the details. Introverted, extroverted. Isn't that interesting? It's a tight cluster.
Thinkers.
Well, people that, you know, they obviously don't know how to deal with people. You know, by the way, there's a joke amongst humanists, by the way. Humanists love humanity. It's people that can't stand. Okay, heroic and wounded, obviously more towards the heroic. There's none in the wounded category, really. Happy versus depressed. Most of the people are pretty happy. Anti-religion, pretty solid over there. Also, we got one friendly to religion. Harbor old religious wounds, thank goodness. Most of the people really gotten over it pretty much. At least you think that. Activist, apathetic. Notice that there's a strong group here, and there's other ones that are kind of, yeah, I'd like to help out a little, you know what I mean? That's the way I kind of see that. Help out a little, but I don't want to get too involved. but I want to be labeled empathetic or labeled myself. Searcher versus settled belief. Isn't that interesting? Look at that distribution right across the board. I didn't know what this, by the way, when I did that one, I didn't know what to expect. Serious versus humorous. That's interesting. I thought we'd have more up here, but like ritual, hate ritual. Boy, we got them at the extremes. Critical versus supportive. Suzanne?
No, the other side.
Oh, I'm Judgment versus mercy. Isn't that interesting? And it really is. You see people, make quick judgments and that's it. I don't like that person or anything else. And people would go, I see what, like that woman last week I dealt with. As I go on with time, I have more mercy. At first it was like, there's no mercy. Quit bothering me. Judgment versus mercy. Habit versus mindfulness. Isn't that interesting? Big picture versus small details. I thought we'd see more clustering up there, but we got 3 of them down to the small details. Art versus science. Look at everybody thinks they're balanced, and we know you're not. Outer-directed, inner-directed. No one here is inner-directed. Naval lectures. By the way, that's one of my big critiques about New Age spirituality. Is there's no social action. There's nothing outer-directed. It's all about looking inward and being navel watching. It drives me nuts. I can't stand that aspect of it. Tolerant versus intolerant. We know that you're not, we know you're tolerant, but you're not intolerant. I'm not sure I believe that. I would be over here. Angry humanism, positive humanism. It's interesting. We got some angry, couple of.
We got some angry, tolerant people.
Ask them 1 minute to the next. Right? Need grounding, don't need grounding. That is fascinating. And this is what I have seen amongst humanist groups.
What do they mean by grounding?
What I mean is some people, you want to know all the answers to why when I talk about like atheists, being an atheist says I just don't believe in God. Well, what about all the other things about your ethics, your beliefs, and everything else? Some people are pretty happy just saying, I don't believe in God, that's it. And other people need grounding or don't need grounding. Certainly agnostic, wow, across the board. Active humanism, passive humanism. Thank goodness we're going to sign you all up for projects. Critical supporting, again, sorry, I did that twice. Heart and mind, people are pretty heartless here, I guess. Where's that tin man? Where is that tin man? By the way, you talk about stories, the quintessential humanist story, you know what it is, don't you?
Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz. And what does he say? He says, you've always had a heart. It's open-minded, closed-minded. Pretty good there. Stories, formulas, and rules. A lot of people like stories. By the way, studies have shown in human communication, 90% of people's communication reality is in stories. When we're with people, just general conversation, 90% of our time is telling stories. Anybody learn anything? Comments?
I'm surprised at the diversity in general. I would have thought more focused on some of that more.
I expected the diversity. There was a few surprises, but that was one of the things I was trying to say here. We are not unified in how we do our humanism or think about our humanism. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. You could be a free thinker and just focus on the anti-religion, or you could be a soft humanist and want ritual and things like that, and it's okay. There's no right way to how to do our humanism. We have to be more tolerant of each other. But by the same token, this is self-reflective. Hopefully you look at it and say, I put myself here, I'm a random thinker. Maybe I need to be more ordered, or maybe Han, you were saying you were over here unordered, and maybe randomness is okay sometimes. So it's just a way of helping you see yourself and others. All right. So one of the goals there is also within our own group, our humanist group, is to be more tolerant of each other when there are these differences. When some of us feel real good about doing humanist marriages, and some of them think, oh my God, it's just going back to religion and things like that. It's okay to have that diversity. What's not okay is to say there's one way to do it. By the way, I did my first marriage last weekend, and it went well. Was it last weekend? Or 2 weekends ago. And I'm doing another baby marriage. So
is this legal in the state now?
Yeah, I'm legal. Han is legal and I'm legal. So we got
And
two.
the ceremonies that he does are just gorgeous. They're just beautiful.
Have you done any gay, lesbian marriages?
I'm not going to go out on it.
Are you open to that?
Of course.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Just checking.
Did you all know, by the way, the AHA was the first national organization to recognize the liberties, sexual liberties of gays and lesbians? The first organization to make a public statement about that. And by the way, after that, somebody blew a shotgun through the window. It's always interesting. Anyway, what I wanted to do the rest of the time is make it more interactive. And I'd like you to pick up the Humanist Manifesto 3. You all have a copy of it? If you don't have one, I'm going to go get you one. Okay. Now, remember, we're coming full circle. Humanist Manifesto 3 is our latest thing that we've done. I was one of the authors of it, and I don't believe everything. I would rewrite some of the things in here, but it's what's called a consensus statement. John Dewey in Humanist Manifesto 1 came out, had a couple words, but he agreed. It's a consensus statement. In general, this is what we believe, because we need to show the world. The general thing is, you don't believe in God, so you don't believe in anything, right? That's what you hear. And what this is, to give a one-pager of the basic things. It's not all fleshed out, obviously, but it gives some of the basics. By the way, this was signed, this was signed by more Nobel laureates than any document in history. I think we're up to 54 or something like that right now. A lot of statements get signed by Nobel laureates. More Nobel laureates have signed this than any other. But what I'd like to do is kind of go through this. The first sentence is the most important because it's the definition. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. The point here is, number one, we don't not believe in God. It's all supernatural. We're naturalists. And that means ghosts, the mysterious energy forces that Oprah talks about, things like that. This world is all there is, and it's enough. But by the same token, humanism is an ethical philosophy. It says that whatever this world may be, this is all we've got, and all we have is each other. And the justice we do or not do at the end of the day is up to us to do. The compassion we do or not do is up to us. Then what it does, it goes through all of, shall we say, the philosophical areas. The life stance, notice it says life stance of humanism, guided by reason, inspired by compassion. Again, where did that come from? Bertrand Russell pointed it out. He said the good life is one guided by reason and motivated by compassion. That's exactly where that word came from. That was one of my ads in there. And informed by experience. What that is, in other words, we're trying to learn from experience and trying to use that to encourage and live our life well and fully. One of the things that I pointed out last week, it's not just happiness now that ethical philosophers are looking at, but a fulfilling life. And that can mean a lot of different things. So it's not just happy, it's living a full life. And we recognize that we've evolved through the ages and continue to evolve. Hopefully, this is Humanist Manifesto 3. Hopefully, there'll be a 4, 5, and 6. Why? Because we're going to learn more. We keep learning more. We keep adjusting. And hopefully, we'll keep adjusting. Never sign and seal this. And it points out that values and ideal, however carefully wrought, are subject to change as knowledge and our understandings advance. Remember, I pointed out in Humanist Manifesto 1, it was very, very hopeful about the possibilities for human nature, etc. And, of course, the Holocaust shattered a lot of those dreams of the goodness of humanity. And so now we had to learn, People aren't all good or can't be trained to be all good. We have the seeds of very good and great and very ill things, and that civilization is a thin veneer over what can be a very barbarous nature. And it's an ongoing document. We're trying to give the conceptual boundaries. It's not the whole thing, it's just the boundaries. So the first one is about epistemology. What do we know and how do we know it? Knowledge of this world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. And note in this case, we talked about when we did the class on epistemology, even intuition. Our intuitions can have a rational foundation. It's automatic, subconscious, bringing together. But even there, if we can test that knowledge with our own experience, it's not just good. That's why science is so good, because it is self-correcting. Intuitions, authority, all these other methods of knowing aren't self-correcting. So we need to test them as best we can. But we also realize that it's not a real simple formula, and there's new departures in thought, in arts, and inner experience, and everything is ultimately, though, subject to analysis by critical intelligence. We wanted to make sure that we showed that art and drama and experience can inform us a great deal. At least it can motivate us. The second major heading is that we're basically naturalists, that we derive, where was our origin? Remember, Darwin gave us a new story, and that story is evolution. And this is what it points out to here. The third thing is ethics. Ethical values are derived from human need and interest as tested by experience. Now, what it doesn't say there is that human need and experience, as I pointed out last week, it's a biopsychosocial phenomena, ethics. We have biological needs, as evolutionary psychology is pointing out, drives, preledictions, needs that derive out of our biology. But then also culture and rational analysis helps us derive some of our ethics as well. Again, it's messy. It all comes together, though. But the most important ethical principle of humanists is the aspect of the inherent worth and dignity of each person. And again, that is not a descriptive thing. It's prescriptive. We believe in affirming the inherent worth and dignity of each person not because it's true, but because it works in real people's lives. But here's interesting too. And we make informed choices in the context of freedom consonant with responsibility. Freedom, people might say, well, I want all the freedom. No, but there's also responsibility. So this gets into, shall we say, the dichotomy of values that we're talking about with Isaiah Berlin. You can even put it down to, for example, communism versus libertarianism. That freedom versus, social responsibility. There's no right answer, but there is a conflict. We have to try and balance the two. Also, now we talk about fulfillment. Remember we talked about religion, those aspects of religion that makes life worth living. And it emerges from individual participation in the service of human ideals. This isn't just liberal, good talking. This is scientifically based. If you look, for example, at Maslow's need hierarchy, are you familiar with it? Maslow was a humanist of the year at one time, but he pointed out he was the first psychologist that looked at what does a not dysfunctional psychological person look like, but what does a good, normal, functioning person look like? And Abraham Maslow came up with need hierarchy. We start off with personal needs where we need food, shelter, and sex, and things like that. After we get those fed, we can only move on after we don't have a hunger in our belly for food and things like that. Then we can move up to more outward directed things and social responsibility, and eventually to what he called self-actualization, where we're really not so much interested in ourselves, our own needs, but it's not just trying to do good. It's we get a self-actualization when we do something larger than ourselves. Scientific studies lately, there's been a whole flock of them, are showing that. Once you start moving out of your own centeredness and have the ability to do that, you don't, if you're in Darfur and people like places like that, but certainly in the United States, we can move out and become more self-actualized. Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, the philosopher and psychologist in the University of Chicago, has done huge studies on this. So how do you gain happiness? And again, it's the same kind of thing, moving out beyond yourself. We're social by nature and find meaning in relationships. We're stuck on this lonely planet without meaning and purpose, but we gain meaning and purpose in our relationships. And of course, we're trying to increase the fulfilling aspects of life for people with each other and minimize suffering. And it's that interdependence that isn't a burden, it enriches our lives. It encourages us, it says, to enrich the lives of others. And we work to benefit society, maximizing individual happiness. And again, if we wrote that today, I think we talk more of fulfilling our lives as much as happiness. In the last two paragraphs, we're concerned about the well-being of all, committed to diversity. We respect those of differing but yet humane views. And it talks about open society, the democratic process. And here's where it gets, we tried to make a statement. Frankly, I didn't think it was strong enough. I wish it would have made it stronger. But a planetary, we get panned for being anthropocentric, whereas humanism is only based on human needs. Well, that's so solipsistic. And we're trying to say we also have a planetary duty to protect nature's integrity, diversity, and beauty in a secure and sustainable manner. And anyway, it ends then saying we're trying to progress to our highest ideals, not the lowest ideals, the highest ideals of what we're capable of. But ultimately, the responsibility for our lives and the kind of world in which we live is ours and ours alone. We can't look to a heavenly Father to save us. We can't look to any rationalistic little formulas to save us. We have to look to ourselves and working together in solidarity with each other. I'd like to get your comments. Anybody got any criticisms or suggestions? If there's anything ring true, or really ring true, or really, not in your own lives. So it's perfect? Well, set it in stone. Bring it down from the mountain. Cast it in stone.
I think it underestimates, underemphasizes fulfillment through the arts and inspiration and creativity, aside from altruism and helping others and interactions. I think those are two pillars for me in terms of a full life. And doing good is fine, but that's half of it. I think a lot of people that are totally unrelated to their fellow man and so on live very full life in terms of the internal life and creativity and enjoyment.
I agree. There probably could be a stronger statement there. You know, we were talking about up there about are we inclined towards the science or the arts? And if you notice, it was clustered pretty balanced. And in most of the cases in humanists, I see that. We have a strong rationalist streak. I mean, I see people who are hardcore rationalists. If you can't put it in numbers or clear words and everything else, then it has no meaning. And people, I've had humanists that tell me they never read literature, never fiction, only nonfiction. And I think that's a real shame because, you know, good authors in any drama, play, or movie, the best way to get to you is very indirectly. Never coming at you directly. You get the message indirectly. Have you noticed that? You just say, oh, you should believe this. It's not going to work. You have to arrive. Schindler's List is a good example. You know, there's lots of messages, moral messages you get from that, but it doesn't beat you over the head about those.
I think there's a clear absence of any reference to the negative impact of organized religion as opposed to what humanism has been able to do.
Yeah. Well, of course, like I say, we have a diversity. There's people that are friendly to religion. It just says it's only the fundamentalists, and then we got people that say any religion is goofballs and everything else, and that's a diversity we have to deal with no matter which ranks. And, you know, personally, I've changed through the years. I was more friendly. I'm pretty hardcore anti-religion. But then I'll come across a nice, well, at work, for example, I've got some people who are just best, nice people who really live in Christianity. I go, damn, you know, I wish I could live my life as good as they are. And they're living by their principles. They're Christian principles. Of course, there's a lot that don't.
Bill and Melinda Gates, humanists, you know. Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah, right. They're humanists.
Are they humanists?
Yeah.
Okay.
They
Because
haven't
60
been-
Minutes last night, there was an episode about them, and the stuff that they're doing is just amazing.
Oh, well, Buffett is.
Yeah.
They are. You know, wish we get some money from them.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've been through this course now. It's been a whirlwind tour. And I've tried to put some of the main points, but also give an in-depth look at what I see as some of the strengths and also the weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses are we have a strong contingent of super rationalists that have led us, I think, in some really bad ways. Also, some people are head only, you know, rather than no heart, and that's hurt us in some ways. I think we have to be more tolerant of each other. We have to be humbler, but yet realize that don't fall into the postmodernist trap that it's all relative and it doesn't matter. No, it really matters. It really matters in people's lives. It really matters in their own life. Truth isn't just something, it's not easy. We know now there's all these problems with gaining truth, but it doesn't mean you give up. I sometimes think that postmodernists are sort of the children because they can't get the candy, you know, they want the perfect grounding, the uncertainty. They can't have it, so they take their marbles away. You know, it's just immature. You know, the early humanists had it right. I think I told you I was lucky enough to know, because I started humanism early, some of the early founders. I knew Ed Wilson, that wrote Humanist Manifesto one. And they were incredible human beings, and much better than most of us are. I think in some ways the early humanists, the literature and how they act, more how they lived their lives. They really were. Ed Wilson was the funniest guy, body, everything else. They lived their life a little bit. It's not the angry kind of humanism. It's, hey, we're building this new thing. They called it the big idea. And in fact, I will tell this story. When when Ed Wilson died, he was in Salt Lake City, the Humanist chapter out there, did the ceremony for him. And Lester Mondale was the last remaining author of the Humanist Manifesto one. And he was crying, and he said, and they were all young men, remember, when they wrote this. He said, when we wrote this, we thought about the big idea. We had the big idea that humanism was going to take over the world. And it did. Maybe this is a marathon rather than a sprint. And we just have to wait a few more generations. There are many that believe that humanism inherently, especially for the United States, is an elitist group and will always remain so, because just the fundamentalism in the United States, it's going to be hard for us ever to become mainstream as it is in Europe, where, you say you're a humanist, and go, well, so what, I think these are questions we have to ask ourselves. Can humanism become mainstream in the United States? If so, how? If we're elitists, how does that help us or hurt us? I think these are major questions we have. We have a all the rest of the world, there's a linearity in the studies and things like that. There's always this outlier that's the United States. So we argue. How do we deal with that? I'm not sure. I've been trying to figure it out for my whole life, frankly. Yeah.
You just touched on something. I thought about this because I'm sitting here and using all these big words that I had to get my dictionary out when I was reading this stuff. And I'm thinking, because I just don't think that way. It's just not. I'm a college graduate, and I took those courses. But my thought was exactly what you're talking about. Is how do you get that to the common man like me? In other words, I think very basically. And I sort of felt that way, and having come to meetings now for I think about 2 years. I just sort of see that what you're talking about. I mean, it doesn't drive me away, but I would think that somehow you've got to come down to the common man.
Well, the problem is, like they say in Europe, it's just kind of over there. Remember, they get classes on Kant and Heidegger and everything else in junior high school. I'm online with humanists throughout the world, and I was talking to Finnish, and we were talking about the problem that the college kids don't get any philosophy, all of it, and they're astounded. They say, my God, our kids are getting heavy philosophy in junior high. By the time they're in high school, they're arguing with each other using these ideas, in high school. By college, it's, they're way behind it. I don't know what the answer is. It's tough, Suzanne.
It's educated.
I think we have maybe a small window of opportunity in that the younger generation, and I think a lot of the surveys have shown, tend to be more accepting and open-minded toward their fellow, their generation. There's not so much prejudice against people of color, against sexual orientation.
Are getting better.
And they're less churched than other generations. And if we are able to make ourselves known, and I think that's happening more and more because we're having books published, we're having people stand up and declare, that they don't believe in God, even we have a senator that does that. But I think that if we try to really bring ourselves out in a positive way, in a public manner, maybe this
15% of people now identify themselves as non-religious. Here, the way I see it is, if you just ask the common person out in the street, you say, do you believe in God or not? Either way, they don't know there's a full life story like we presented here. They don't know that there's this life stance that answers all the questions. It's out there. They believe that there's no supportive systems. If you don't believe in God, you have no beliefs and you have no support, no ethical system. They don't want to be left with like that. Also, there's the very real fact that the social prohibitions in the United States are unbelievable. If you're going to be a humanist, the number one factor first you got to have is courage, because you're gonna, we're the most hated group in the United States. This study show. So I think there's two things. I think it's education, but it's also providing the positive thing. Hey, we do have a story, a positive story for you, a grounding for you, a life stance that you can grab onto. When I found the Humanist Manifesto when I was young, I will tell you, it revolutionized my life. I said, my God, here is this thing that it says everything I believe, but so much more succinctly and clearly and evocatively. My God, where have I been all these years? This is me. But I didn't have that until I was lucky to find it.
The big idea, as envisioned by the Humanist Manifesto, has in fact been implemented. In 1945, at Dumbarton Oaks, outside of San Francisco, the United Nations was formed. If you read the charter of the United Nations and the subsequent amendments, it reads very much like the Humanist Manifesto.
Well, you know why? It was written by most of the top people in the humanist movement. Julian Huxley, who was, I can't remember his exact title in the UN, he was one of the main writers, and guess who was one of the behind-the-scenes writers of it? Was Eleanor Roosevelt. She was added to it. But all of those things, it was basically right out of the Humanist Manifesto. When all the people, the great black diplomat there, all the top people of the early UN, and that's why, frankly, now you find that the UN Treaty on Human Rights, which again was written by Julian Huxley and others, the Islamic countries are all against it because it talks about equal rights for women and things like that, and they don't want that. So, it's under attack, but that's why. Yes?
As far as the discussion on how can humanism become something that's mainstream in the U.S., I think a question within that question is, are we talking about humanist ethics or humanist metaphysics being integrated into the mainstream? And I think that if we focus on the ethics more than the metaphysics, because the ethics are what is of real consequence in the way each person is, we're all living our lives. If we can make that alive, and I think that that's becoming more and more alive even within religions, even within Christianity.
And that is the way people, especially in ethical culture, have viewed it. Don't talk about it, do it. Live your life, and many people do it. The problem with it is that people don't see it. That's the problem. It goes...
Because we're invisible.
We're invisible. We're invisible in the world.
A key point, I think. We've seen this entire page of all these positive thoughts, but the distinguishing, definitive term about humanism is captured just in a couple of words here, without supernatural.
It's the only negative in the whole document.
That is the central thing that we're all about.
It's not. See, that's where I would disagree. It's not that.
I think all of these sentiments and thoughts and so on and so forth are included in other so-called religions. But that's not the point I wanted to make. I argue about that. The point I want to make in terms of what we should do is a strategic one, which is that I don't think, and of course I'm very into politics, but I don't think we want to try to convert the unconverted directly. I think we want to do what you expressed earlier, which is to make them aware of the fact that we are here and that there is a place when their doubts occur. I don't think we want to create doubt too much. I think that would be dysfunctional, I think, in terms of political opprobrium and opposition. I think we want to, but publicly make the world aware of the fact that we exist as a comfortable place for people that have doubts to come, and then they will find out this is a great place.
Oh, and that's one of the marketing tools in the sense that the Humanist Manifesto is. It's a one-page document. People say, you don't believe in me. Here, take a look at this. This is what most of us tend to believe. And you can use that. I'll tell you something. Are you all, any of you familiar with the Willow Creek Church up in Chicago? It's the largest mega church. Willow Creek Church. It's a non-denominational church. All the mega churches, the model for all through country through mega churches, and by the way, 50% of the people that are joining churches have over 2,000 members. This is where all the growth is. Set the model. The guy that started it realized that 35% of the people are unchurched. So he would go around and ask people, do you go to church? If they said, yes, I go to church, he'd go, thank you, I'll move on. And he said they don't go to church, but generally, then maybe they have been to church, or they're what we call the fuzzy theists, or what they call the searchers. This is our market too. What he did, he went after it, built a 20,000 member church. I mean, you have to see this thing to believe it. I mean, this is a complex and a program. I mean, they've got a full symphony orchestra, drama reading. And if you look at their services, they start off what they call their seeker services or their searcher services. They have no God talk, no religious symbolism anywhere in the building. They have a food mall that looks, in fact, they had a mall designer, not a church designer, build a building. It looked like you would know it from a standard mall. And these services, there's no God talk. It's a humanist service for all intents and purposes. And yet what they do, they use that to manipulate people to slowly bring them to a full-blown evangelicalism, okay? It's very slick. I've been there several times.
Somebody with it?
Pardon?
Rick somebody?
Rick Warren, Heibels. Heibels is the guy that started it. And he's very good, very low-key. But again, the point is, there is a market, those people out there, but they are searchers. They are looking for an answer. They give it to them. Why aren't we? We have an answer too. It's a different answer.
But that's show business.
It is show business, but my point is, they're talking about unformed people who are searching, who don't know one way or another, you know, and they bring them slowly. And I've been on one of their chat lines where they've talked about the manipulativeness of it. And people argue within that church about is that good or, you know, or bad the way they do it. There's an internal debate.
One other point, it's kind of an elaboration of the point I made earlier, extension of it. And this is more of a personal comment. Very personally, I personally do not feel motivated, although I do a fine job in argumentation. But I'm not motivated to try to talk someone of faith out of their faith. That's not going to make them happier. Leave them with their faith. It's a crutch they need, they want it, they're at that stage of life. In other words, what I'm saying is, let's work on those people who are moving into an area.
What I'm talking about, those unformed seekers who are just, but they get to it. You know what happens when when you're in your teens and 20s, it's all sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? You got lots of distractions. Then all of a sudden, people get in their late 20s. I know I did too. And then all of a sudden, you start questioning all these things. And that's when they get most of these people. These are people, again, they don't know there's an alternative. If
That's
you're not
why we've got to be out there.
we have to explain. So those people, it's not trying to convert them and say, hey, here is an alternative.
But there's a lot of in-your-face humanists. I think I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
I think some of our discussions have reflected. Anti-God talk, and oh man, I'm out of here if I hear the word God. We get into the Unitarian church. That kind of confrontational in-your-faceness. I don't think that's the way to go about it. It's a matter of this is.
Well, we are expanding on college campuses. I know we have a very small presence compared to the other.
So you may not know it, but that young man that came here, Walker, I can't remember his name, but he wrote me an email I sent around to the board, He went up to Tufts University because he went to be a student under Daniel Dennett, who was a Humanist in the year. And in fact, I gave him the Humanist of the Year award, but anyway, studied. He was all excited. I gave him Good Without God. And by the way, these are the two books you absolutely should read. You know, this is the older one. Horace Lamont, a famous philosopher, wrote that. It's dated, but it's still very, very good. And then the new one by Greg Epstein. Well, anyway, Greg is the Humanist chaplain at Harvard. And he joined, by the way, the Free Thought Humanist group there at Tufts. And they got a group of people and went up to see Greg Epstein. And he was quite impressed by him. He's an impressive guy. A young guy, he's like 32 years of age. He's really sharp. But anyway, there we go. This is a kid, sharp as hell, and motivated, got the fire in the belly, and we're starting to reach some of these kids. And we get, you know, did you know that there's more student groups now than Humanist chapters? I think there's 120 Humanist chapters, and there's like 160 or so, or 200, something like that, college groups now.
Yeah. That's where our promise lies with our youth.
Yeah. And the problem is sustainability of organizations, you know, because they're there for 4 years, that kind of thing. But the point is that there's some alternative for these kids, and they're starting to support each other, and hopefully make a commitment then get involved early age to lifelong humanism, like I did. I was lucky I found it early, and it's made all the difference in my life. That Humanist Manifesto 1, just reading that thing, I go, my God, you know. And hopefully people read Humanist Manifesto 3 and do the same thing. I know it's happened. I've had people say that to me. Other comments or anything else about humanism, generally your own struggle to figure out how we put all these pieces together. I know it's been a tough course. You know, the course on ethics was a whole graduate level course on ethics, and one night the class on epistemology was a whole graduate class on epistemology. We raced through it, and you know, we can later go into some of these details if you'd like. You know, we can focus, you know, one of our discussion groups and things. Any area along there, and there's fertile ground for all of these areas for further discussion. We buzzed through it, but we also got a lot in. I hope you aren't overwhelmed. I try to hone it down to some of the basic principles on each area, and hopefully, out of all of that chaos, that you'll grasp some of these tools. Any other comments or things that you've learned or want to share?
I just want to say I'm glad to see your names on this.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm glad to see that we've had some of those people here.
Yeah,
And to address our group, and thank you for that.
Yeah, by the way, most of you know about next week. We've got a person coming. We haven't been able to publicize it because of potential threats against his own life, etc. But you want to be here for next Sundays. And also on December, I got Tony Hyland to come here. I got to encourage all these people. Beg, borrow, and steal. You know, it's sort of like paying back favors now. Okay.
Now that you're retired.
Well, I've spoken for them at different areas and taught for them and things like that. So Tony Hyland is the ex-executive director for the AHA. He's also presently the head of ethical culture. He's a great guy. He's a great speaker, and you want to come see him in December. Really.
Why can't you publicize the meeting?
Because we can't have his name out there.
Yeah, but how about if you just say a prominent speaker wants to?
They already have one.
We say it's a prominent speaker. We can't say his name or what he's about.
Is this the guy from Afghanistan?
Yeah, he's from Afghanistan, and he's under Islam, they will allow tolerance of a Christian or a Jew. You can live your own life, but the worst thing is if you were a Muslim and defected became a humanist, then you're in real trouble. Then you basically have a death threat on your head. That's what he had. He was on our list, and he asked to be taken off because on the internet they can get around and they can find him. And so it is real. This isn't, some thing. And he's going to tell this story. So anyway, next weekend we got a great speaker. December we're going to have a great speaker. Please come to all of that. And I want to thank you all for coming and sticking with me. I know I've been disoriented and distracted. I was saying I wish I could have a do-over on some of these because I've completely revamped this course. I've done it for 20 years, and this time I've totally redone it. I wish I had a second chance to do it. But anyway, thank you all.
Next week's meeting Sunday at 5 o'clock?
7 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Don't miss it.